With the federal budget looming, two leaders have very different days. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Navigating the issues that matter to you. It's Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
While the Prime Minister is playing his greatest hits, his opponent is in damage control. Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre are both making news today, but for vastly different reasons, as Budget Day fast approaches in Ottawa. Prime Minister Carney stood before an audience of students at the University of Ottawa for what was billed as a nationally televised address. But much of what he has said dozens, if not hundreds of times before, such as his views on the state of Canada's relationship with the United States.
The U.S., as we all know, has fundamentally changed its approach to trade. It's raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression. And the scale and the speed of these developments are not part of a smooth transition, they're a rupture. Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was, even though in this new world of protectionism, we have the best trade deal of any other country, and we're working to make it even better still.
Another familiar theme throughout the Prime Minister's 34-minute speech was nation-building projects.
But look, protection is not enough. We have to build, and our plan to build, first and foremost, is here at home so we can take control of our future and, as I said, give you back yours. In the last 6 months, we've worked to create the right conditions to get big things built faster. At the end of June, we passed the One Canadian Economy Act to remove federal barriers to internal trade and to fast-track the approval of nation-building projects. In August, we opened the Major Projects Office, which serves as a single point of contact to get those nation-building projects built faster.
Mr. Carney also mentioned his plan to accelerate home building.
To help double the pace of housing construction within a decade, using new factory technology, cutting building times by 50%, reducing costs by 20%, and lowering emissions by 20%.
And he talked about his plan to get tough on crime.
We will table legislation for stricter bail and sentencing laws. To help secure our communities, we're hiring 1,000 new RCMP personnel, and to secure our borders, we're hiring 1,000 new border services officers.
We expect to learn more about the new Liberal tough on crime bill later today. The Justice Minister, Sean Fraser, is making an announcement about that. But this whole speech from the Prime Minister was supposed to outline and defend the budget coming down in less than 2 weeks. It's a budget that doesn't have much support from the opposition parties. There's even been speculation this week the budget might not pass, which would trigger another election. During his speech, Mr. Carney used the key Liberal talking point on that budget: generational investments.
We will make generational investments with a plan to protect our communities, our borders, our way of life. We will build a stronger economy where everyone has a chance to get ahead. And we will empower Canadians with new opportunities, better careers, and a lower cost of living.
About the only new news to come out of Mr. Carney's nationally televised address last night was his claim that his government would double exports to non-U.S. markets over the next decade. That would be about $300 billion worth of trade over 10 years, which is roughly the GDP of Bangladesh. While the Prime Minister was taking up airtime on the news networks, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was getting a grilling from the press gallery over remarks he made on a right-leaning podcast about the leadership of the RCMP and former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Ottawa bubble has been filled with rumors and speculation about Conservative MPs who are growing tired of Poilievre, and even rumors that a few of his MPs could cross the floor and join the Liberals. That's not going to happen, according to Poilievre.
Poilievre, are you confident that by the end of the day today, all of your MPs will still be Conservative MPs?
Yes.
And that's about all he had to say about that. When asked to explain if he really thought the RCMP leadership is despicable and covered up for Trudeau, and if he really thinks Mr. Trudeau should be in jail, Poilievre said that's not what he said.
That you went too far in saying the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, should be in jail.
That's not what I said.
Well,
That's not
that's
what
what
I
I
said.
heard. What did you
That's
say
not what I
then?
said.
Repeat what you said.
Sure, I'll tell you what I said. I was asked about the scandals of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. And what would I do if such scandals and corruption were to happen when I become Prime Minister? And I said I would have zero tolerance for corruption. Nobody is above the law.
Well, the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievre had very different days. The two did actually meet yesterday to talk about that budget. Mr. Poilievre said after the meeting that he pushed the Prime Minister on affordability.
We shared our respective views. I'm not going to report to you anything that he said because that was in the four walls of the room. I can only speak for myself. And I reiterated that we need this to be an affordable budget. We've seen over the last 10 years of Liberal deficit spending is driven up the cost of living and driven down investment in our country. So my message is it's time to reverse course on the costly decade of deficit spending that has given us more expensive food and housing. The Canadian people deserve a break. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living, and so if the Prime Minister is serious about making Canada a more affordable country, then he needs to bring forward an affordable budget.
As for the Prime Minister's day today, Mark Carney had an event with the Ontario Premier Doug Ford in Bowmanville. And later today, Mr. Carney will go to the batting practice for the Toronto Blue Jays ahead of Game 1 of the World Series tomorrow night. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Well, he's my friend on the right side of things. Michael Taube is with us every week, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Welcome back.
Thanks, Rob. Hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Good.
Well, let's start with Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party. He's been the
Sure.
center of attention for so much of the political week. I would like to know what you think about all the rumors and speculation that his leadership grip on the Conservative Party is slipping. What do you think about that?
It's complete nonsense. I mean, obviously, I would always be willing to believe, because if you look at the history of Canadian politics and every majority or minority government, there's always someone who's unprincipled and looking around for something better. And we've seen MPs and former ministers, and in the case of David Emerson, ministers actually cross the floor. And we've seen it actually in very high-profile situations. Again, this is just part of the nature of politics, the day-and-day push of it. There are people who hold a very principled position and decide that they are elected as, let's say in this case, elected as a New Democrat. They will stay a New Democrat, lifelong New Democrats. They would never leave the New Democratic Party. Then there are also examples of NDPers who, at the first bite of something, usually from the Liberals, will go running. This is just the way it is, and this is not an attack on the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservatives, anybody. When nonsense like this comes around, the first thing you have to do is think, even if some Conservative MPs, hypothetically, were displeased with Pierre Poilievre talking about, Justin Trudeau, the RCMP, and whether the former Prime Minister should have been arrested, I'm sure there are some who are disappointed either because they didn't believe it, they would rather it was not part of the public conversation, or it's just a topic that they'd like to get away from because, thankfully, Justin Trudeau is no longer our Prime Minister, and we should be all pleased with that. But generally speaking, most Conservatives behind the scenes, maybe they weren't terribly crazy about the fact that it became a topic of conversation. I strongly doubt that any of them have been exploring options right now. The rumor mill is what it is. Most people recognize that it's nonsense and nothing. But of course, the media types who don't like the Conservatives and don't like Pierre Poilievre, the party leader, will naturally spin it as they can and move it as far as they can.
So what really got this going this week, the question specifically about his leadership and whether he's the right leader for the party, was an opinion piece penned by someone named Dimitri Soudis, who was an aide
Yes.
to Prime Minister Harper when he was prime minister, of course.
Hmm.
I don't know how well you know Dimitri Soudis, if you
I
if
do.
you
I
if
do.
you
Yes.
worked with him,
We
and
did. We were
he certainly
together.
came out swinging against Polyev and suggested
Eh.
maybe this is not the right person with the right temperament to have the job as leader of the Conservative Party. What did you think
Hmm.
of that? Because he has said subsequently that he has heard from many MPs who share his thoughts. What did you think about that?
He may have heard from some MPs who share his thoughts, but that's a different issue. Dimitri Soudis and I know each other. We worked in the Prime Minister's office together in the early days. We certainly know one another. We disagreed on some issues, but we always got along and still do to this day. If you actually look, the other day I wrote a very long, I called it short. I guess it was a little longer than that. We'll call it a mid-sized post on X, where I basically said that, did I agree with Dimitri Soudas's position in the Toronto Star and the way that he looked at Pierre Poilievre? No. Did I agree with Andrew McDougall, who I also worked with in the Prime Minister's office, or shall we say in the Conservative government per se? Did I agree with his position, which was a little different than Dimitri Soudas's, but obviously put up some discussion of whether Pierre Poilievre should have spoken with a certain type of social media? I agreed a little bit more with McDougall's position, but there were plenty of things I disagreed on. But what I said was that's healthy, that's normal, and that's perfectly fine. Because if they read my stuff, and they've never commented to me in either case, they probably disagreed more often than they agreed. That's the nature of free speech. That's the nature of intellectual discourse. And if you really look at Soudas's pieces, because people, as they often like to do, they pluck certain lines and thoughts and sentences and words. The point is, everyone was saying, oh, look at his past history, da-da-da-da-da. Whatever happened, happened. We don't have to rehash the whole thing. He did what he did. Soudas remains a conservative. Sure, he has different points of view than, say, I do on certain issues, including the party leader. But he's not calling for Poilievre's head. He's just obviously frustrated by certain things he's seeing right now and frustrated with certain language, especially related to Trudeau and the RCMP. And he's allowed in a free society like Canada to say something like that, as I am allowed or anyone else is allowed to oppose it, not making it personal, but using
Right.
ideas, logic, and intelligence to do it.
Okay, when we come back, we'll hear from the speechwriter on the speech last night from Prime Minister Mark Carney, his nationally televised address. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know, here with Michael Taube. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
We're here with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So Mark Carney did a nationally televised address last night.
Right.
Nationally televised address by Canadian prime ministers are they're usually reserved for really consequential moments in time.
Yes, typically.
Like William Lyon Mackenzie King did one just
That's
before
right.
the conscription plebiscite during the Second World War. Pierre Trudeau did a couple, War Measures Act during the October crisis in the lead up to the 1980 referendum. Brian Mulroney on the Charlottetown Accord. Jean Chrétien
Right.
just before the 95 referendum. Paul
Yes,
Martin
that's
during the sponsorship scandal when his government was hanging by a thread. Stephen Harper 3 years later, same thing, when his government was hanging by a thread. So
right.
I tuned in last night because I hear, wow, Prime Minister, nationally televised address must be something big. I have to say, my own impression, I was left wanting. What I really heard was kind of the same stump speech that Prime Minister Carney gives wherever he goes. What did you think as the speechwriter?
I'm with you. I think it was also very much a stump speech, or could have been easily given in the House of Commons if he had just removed the context of speaking to university students and some of the language. I mean, this is a political speech. That's all it was. This was not something where national airtime needed to be interrupted. I mean, again, Mark Carney, does he know how to speak in front of a crowd? Yes. He's not very engaging. He's very monotone in the way he does things. And when he tries to raise his voice or change his mannerisms a little bit, like you do, I do, and others who sort of do this, either for a living or whatever, we know how to do it. We know how to actually go into an audience and tell them certain things, where the monotone part should be obviously history or straight politics or something like that. But when you have something you want to make personal, you've got to be uplifting, inspirational. That's what leadership shows. Mark Carney knows how to speak, but he's not an inspirational speaker. And like I said, very monotone, and he was throughout this. But in terms of the actual speech, there was nothing to it. I mean, again, favor fortunes the bold, which he repeated a couple of times, Virgil's famous line. All right, fine. But to really think that's going to inspire a room full of university students that, wow, Mark Carney understands me. The multi-billionaire understands me. That's great. I mean, I'm sure he's hoping for that, and I know that obviously the Liberals felt that putting him on national air and allowing him to speak about these things and talk about where the Canadian economy is, the fact that things are different with the United States, which he really should be working on improving, Rob. This is a point, rather than saying,
Okay.
It's all done, it's dead, it's gone. That's great. If this is the best he can come up with, this is inspirational, this is leadership, look for solutions. That's what he's supposed to be doing. But this thing was not important, and certainly based on the other speeches you've listed by other prime ministers, there was no need for this.
Yeah, well, I have more to say on that coming up on our Newsday panel with our political pundits coming up right after the news at the bottom of the hour. We have about a minute here.
Sure.
LA, Toronto, tomorrow night in Toronto, game 1, and then game 2 will be on Saturday. It's the World Series.
Yep.
The Dodgers have to be considered the favorites, I think, and the Toronto the underdogs. Give me a prediction. What do you think?
Number of games? Dodgers in 6. I think they are a machine. We have seen how well they've done through the playoffs. They had a little bit of a spill during the regular season, caught up, won the division, and have just been playing solid ever since. The way they beat down both the Phillies and the Brewers, I watched most of those games. It was fascinating. Ohtani and the gang, I think they're going to win pretty easily. And Toronto should obviously deserves credit for having made it this far. I don't know how they did, and I don't know how they got slipped by the Mariners, but they did. But in fairness, I don't know how they slipped by my guys, the Yankees, except that the Yankees played lousy, and that's why it happened.
Okay.
But
All right.
Dodgers in 6.
Dodgers in 6. Okay. Well, we'll check in next week and see where things stand. Thank you.
Sure. You bet.
Great
Take
to
care.
hear from you. Yeah, Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
And it's time for our Thursday Newsday political panel. Nick McRoberts is with us from Hill and Knowlton. How are you, Nick?
Hey, Rob. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's great to connect. Along with Melanie, Paradis, president at Texture Communications. Welcome back to you. How are you these days?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Everybody watch TV last night?
We did.
Okay. Fascinating. Really. Nick, I mean this with all due respect. Seriously. What was the point of that? What was the point of Prime Minister Carney's nationally televised address?
I mean, I think it points to the need that this government has to really get Canadians ready for what is going to come in the budget. Prime Minister Carney has alluded to some austerity measures that is going to come, but at the same time, I think that there's a more real way that he can frame that. You know, he framed his conversation very much as saying, to the university students in front of him, we're coming into hard times, but we're going to do hard things for your sake. But, I'm kind of at the end of that cadre, that generation of people that he's speaking to, and I didn't feel reassured by it. I didn't feel reassured that he's willing to kind of take one on the chin so that I can have a better future. And so, I think PMO will feel that they did their job. They prepped Canadians ahead of the Prime Minister jetting off to Asia, but I still don't think for the average Canadian it did anything, to dissuade them that this budget will be all flowers for them.
Okay, let me ask you that. Let me just jump in there just before we get to Melanie. What do I know about the budget that I didn't know before that speech yesterday?
Well, there's a climate competitiveness strategy. I think that was the new piece, but other than that, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, nationally televised address. Melanie, what do you see as the point? What was the point of that exercise last night? 34 minutes worth.
It marked the end of the Trudeau era. So this, to me, wasn't about policy detail. It was a positioning exercise, all about tone, authority, and contrast, specifically the contrast between Carney and Trudeau, and to a lesser extent, the contrast with Poilievre. Carney was telegraphing that this is the end of business as usual in Ottawa. Gone was the soft lighting, the casual social media tone, the performative optimism of the Trudeau era. And in its place, there was a podium, a field of flags, and a pretty serious, at times boring, speech about rebuilding Canada's economic independence. But it was definitely a tone reset, not a policy rollout. Yes, there was a mention of whatever the climate competitive strategy is. We'll see what that is. There was the Buy Canadian policy we've heard about. There's going to be an immigration recalibration that sounds like it'll focus on talent. So maybe that's actually going back to the way Harper had things. But the style is really the story to me. It was Carney showing Canadians what a post-Trudeau liberal looks and sounds like. And if I could say, where I think it was a bit disjointed is he delivered this to a room full of university students and did attempt to talk to them as if, acknowledging this was an audience he had not previously focused on and didn't win in the election. But the words and tone of the speech were actually aimed at, to me anyway, at boardrooms and unions, not living rooms or classrooms. And that's where there was a real disconnect.
Agree, Nick, with Melanie's analysis there?
A little bit. I would say on the business side, just briefly, he talked about wanting to provide certainty for business, but if I don't really see where the certainty for business came out of that speech, it just left people going, okay, well, I guess we'll see what happens in 2 weeks, which I don't take as certainty.
Okay. Now, on the budget itself, which is less than 2 weeks from now, there's been all kinds of talk, mostly from, I should say, the Liberal House leader, that there could be an election triggered over this federal budget, given what Steve McKinnon says is what he's hearing from the opposition parties and the lack of support from the opposition parties. What is this? Is this just a game of chicken? Is this posturing? How seriously do you take this notion that there could actually be an election 6 months after the last one on this budget? What do you think there, Melanie?
The budgets are always confidence votes, so you could bring down a minority government at any time with this. And it is possible, but I do think it's unlikely unless someone decides they actually want to go to an election. The math is pretty fragile. The Liberals are 3 votes short of a majority, so they do need a dance partner here. Both the Bloc and the NDP have some incentives to extract concessions here, but not, I don't think, to topple the government. The Conservatives have set up their own frame here. They've drawn a $42 billion deficit line that they've said thou shall not cross this line, or they may not be able to support it. And they'll claim anything that's above that line to be proof of fiscal failure. But I just don't see us going to an election.
What do you think, Nick? What's going on here with all this talk about an election?
I think the Liberals are hedging their bets a little bit in case one of the opposition parties decides that they want to get bold and vote down the government. But look, the Conservatives are on the rocks with a leader who is alienating some of his own caucus, with a leadership review coming up.
Really? On the rocks? Okay.
Well,
we'll talk about
if you were in the Ottawa bubble yesterday,
Right.
But then at the same time, the NDP are in no position to go to an election. I don't know how well the Bloc want to do that either. So none of the opposition parties are ready to go in an election. And so I think the Liberals are just sitting back and saying, if we do go into an election or the budget falls, it's on them. So we'll see where it goes.
All right. Might pick it up on that, but I do want to talk about Mr. Poilievre and the week that he has had as well. During our discussion today with Nick McRoberts from Hill and Knowlton and Melanie Paradis from Texture Communications on our Thursday Newsday political panel here on News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
It's our Thursday Newsday political panel. Melanie Paradis, President, Texture Communications. Nick McRoberts is with Hill and Knowlton. Let me just run this scenario by you. I did this yesterday. There is this line of thinking, I think it's shared by myself and about 4 other people in Canada. The Liberals would love to have an election. Why not have an election? The NDP's problems are not the Liberal Party's fault, and the Liberal Party shouldn't care. And they're looking over at the other side, and they see a Conservative leader who is not nearly as popular as the Prime Minister right now. And sure, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, has a leadership review in January. That should not be of any concern to the Liberals. But it's one thing for Poilievre to be defeated once in an election, quite another to be defeated twice. So let's have an election over the budget, win a majority government, and it's a brand new political ball game in January. What do you think about that, Melanie?
Well, anytime you go to the polls, it's a really big risk, and that's why. So there was a rumor this week that kind of ran rampant through the Ottawa bubble circles that there might be some defections from the conservative ranks over to the Liberals, that a couple of MPs might cross the floor. And the reason why that rumor churned so quickly was because of this question around an election. The reason why you would go to an election is to get a majority, which they only need, 4 in order to have 3, but the speaker, right? The speaker can then break a tie, so it just would be cleaner. Yeah. It's cleaner with 4.
They kind of have. I would add Elizabeth May is kind of a de facto Liberal. I would also add. It all evens out.
Sure. But so this rumor rips through Ottawa that there are a couple of MPs that are considering crossing the floor. And this kind of talk always surfaces when there's a bit of a momentum shift. It's kind of like the rumors that we hear about whether or not there will be a cabinet shuffle. If even a handful of MPs are whispering, it tells you that, in my opinion, that Carney's performance is starting to make Conservative benches nervous. And in part, that's because Carney is trying to reposition the Liberals where the old progressive Conservatives once lived, fiscally cautious, pro-industry, pro-growth, and that creates discomfort for some Conservatives who want to win the middle. And I think it's going to trigger a bit of an existential crisis among Conservatives. I think that we're about to enter a period where we're asking, who are we? We used to have debates around social conservatism and its place in the party, and we found a way to balance those different priorities and make space for everyone under the big tent we talk about a lot. But now we're seeing factions in the party that are more concerned with culture war issues or immigration rates or a very different lens on what fiscal conservatism means when you're trying to address problems like housing affordability for a younger demographic. And so I don't think it's really a question of Pierre's leadership. I think that there are actually existential questions that we're grappling with about who is conservative and what our priorities are in this moment.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, Pierre Poilievre has been front and center this week merely because of all the reports and speculations about his grip on the leadership of the party. And to Melanie's point, Nick, rumors that a few Conservative MPs are thinking about crossing the floor. Nothing to report yet. What do you think of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Melanie that there's a wider calculation going on here from all the parties around where Canadians are framing themselves politically. I mean, if you look at the polls, right, the Liberals right now are about 2% lower than they were when the election happened, and the Conservatives were 1% lower. So, all that in, it is a real gamble if the Liberal Party wanted to go to an election right now. That being said, there's also in that calculation, you have to account for the fact that Pierre hasn't really changed his tone since the by-election. I think there was a little bit of a softening, but then you come out again with some of this language that he's used around the RCMP and Justin Trudeau, and it seems that he just can't move on. So I think from a Liberal perspective, the safe choice is to not push too hard for an election, see where the wider electorate feels they fit in within your political party, continue to open up your base if you're the Liberals and appeal to progressive Conservatives, and then your own base, eat into the NDP at a time where they don't have an identity, and then go, arguably in the spring when, it's again been rumored that Carney is kind of pushing for that. I think that's the game plan here.
Okay, we'll be right back. I want to talk about the intersection of sports and politics. In fact, both the Prime Minister and the Ontario Premier at their event in Bowmanville today weighed in on the Toronto Blue Jays, making their predictions about the Toronto Blue Jays. So, there is this attempt to kind of tie your political fortunes in with a winning sports team. I want to talk a little bit about sports and politics when we come back. I'm Rob Snow. It's our Thursday Newsday political panel. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
All right, something a little on the lighter side for our Thursday Newsday political panelists. Melanie Paradis from Texture Communications and Nick McRoberts from Hill and Knowlton. Everybody's on the Jays bandwagon. Yes, I didn't have to climb on the bandwagon. I was already on there. Melanie? Okay, good. It's un-Canadian, not to cheer for the Jays right now. But let me ask you this. I'm always curious about politicians and whether they are seeking to kind of maybe get a boost for their own political fortunes by talking about sports and cheering on the sports team. Prime Minister Carney for today, he's going to go to Blue Jays practice at 4:30. He made his prediction today. He said Jays in 6. So did the Ontario Premier Doug Ford said Jays in 6. Even last night he made mention of was it hitting home runs or something? Or swinging for the fences made it into his speech last night, right? So we're going to swing for the fences, right? In a reference to the Jays. Stephen Harper certainly basked in the glow, I think, of the 2010 Vancouver games and the golden goal from Sidney Crosby. Gosh, a year later, he won his one and only majority government, but Stephen Harper wrote books about hockey, of course. Pierre Trudeau organized the Summit Series in 1972 as diplomacy through sport. And lo and behold, Henderson scores for Canada. It becomes this iconic moment. I would also say it can work against you if you want to be seen as, athletic or involved in sports. 1974, Bob Stanfield drops a football in North Bay, and it, it costs him, becomes this iconic photo that may have cost him that election against Pierre Trudeau. But do you think politicians can get a boost if a Canadian sports team goes on a run? Nick, what do you think?
Kim Campbell was prime minister when the Jays won their '93 World Series and then lost 2 days later. But in all seriousness, I think it's just a matter of relatability, right? It's politicians are always trying to remind people that they're just like you. And I think Mark Carney is a former central governor and considerably more wealthy than I think any of us on the panel. Needs to continue to relate to people, and if it's through sport and it's through a national team, basically is what the Blue Jays are, then I think it's fair play, and I think it'll give him some good graces anyway from kind of the average Canadian.
All right, what do you think, Melanie?
So sports are emotional shorthand for unity, and after weeks of hard-edged economic talk, Carney wants to show like a lighter, more relatable side that's optimism, national pride, maybe a little bit of swagger, maybe a bat flip here or there. I think it's calculated, but it's smart. The Jays have fans in every riding, like they're our national team. The prime minister at batting practice signals approachability. There's always a risk of there being a gaffe, of course, but
Yeah.
he's trying to
Like, would you
move from
put
like
him in, would you
techno.
put him in the would you put him in a batter's box? Would you put a helmet on him and have him swing the bat?
I mean, this is a guy who like actually played hockey in university, I think. So, or I would tell him to stick to the sports that he's good at and not risk playing
Right.
playing a
Okay.
sport that he's maybe not as comfortable with. But
Right.
the imagery of just being there, rooting on the team, even throwing the ball has some risks. We've seen like presidents fail that in the United States. So I would definitely caution doing any actual sports activity, but showing up there and rooting on the team is definitely a good image. And like, look, yesterday in question period, he also made a point of emphasizing the like no I in team language. This is all very much part of his narrative right now. And if the Jays do go on a big run, like you can't buy that kind of morale boost for the country heading into what sounds like it might be a tough budget season.
Wow. Really interesting analysis. Thank you so much to the both of you, Nick McRoberts and Melanie Paradis. We'll talk soon. All the best. Go
Thanks,
Jays,
Rob.
go.
Thanks.
Go Jays.
Yeah. Melanie Paradis from Texture Communications, president there. Nick McRoberts with Hill and Knowlton. Talkback right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Our topic today is young Canadian men. Young Canadian men. How are they doing? Do you think? How are they doing? And we're thinking here, Canadian men under the age of 30. The young Canadian man under the age of 30 or so, a little over, whatever, no hard and fast rule. But how are they doing, in your opinion? That young Canadian man that you know, how is that man doing? Is he thriving? Is he doing okay? Or is he struggling? If he's thriving, why is he thriving? What were the pieces that were in place that helped him to thrive in life? If he's doing okay, same questions. If he's struggling, what's he struggling with? Why is he struggling? This is a very important topic. And it's one that doesn't get a lot of attention. But with your help, we want to kind of shine a light on this today at 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. How is the young Canadian man that you know doing in life? Thriving, getting by, or struggling? I want to raise this today because, according to several research reports, there is a silent epidemic in this country. And it's about the mental health of young Canadian men. They are having a really hard time. Many, perhaps millions of young Canadian men are having a really hard time. And according to these reports, part of the reason they're having a hard time is because they don't talk about it. Stigma. It's not the manly thing to do. They don't want to appear weak. They don't want to admit that they're having a hard time. And they keep it to themselves. But I've read through several reports this week in advance of this show today. And I'm telling you, the research findings should really be setting off alarm bells. For example, the Canadian Men's Health Foundation found that 57%, almost 6 in 10, young Canadian men between the ages of 19 and 29 are suffering from moderate to high anxiety. That is almost twice the rate of the broader population. Or, I guess, put another way, if you're a young man, twice as likely to suffer from moderate to high anxiety. Rates of depression, according to the same study. Moderate to severe depression rates much higher for men in that age group, 19 to 29. 43% versus 18% in the general population. The research also suggests that men are increasingly becoming more socially isolated. 67% of young men, think about that number, almost 7 out of 10 young Canadian men, socially isolated. 7 out of 10 say they're at risk of living alone. Listen to some of these other very troubling statistics. 67% of young men report feeling emotionally overwhelmed at least once a week. Emotionally overwhelmed on a weekly basis. 6 out of 10 say they feel tense and alone in their daily lives. Tense and alone daily. And more than 4 out of 10, 42% say they have no one to confide in. No one. They have no one. That's sad. Despite these high levels of stress, only 18%, fewer than 1 in 5, have ever sought out help from a mental health professional. According to a Calgary-based organization called Men-Tell, Men, T-E-L-L, of the estimated 4,000 suicides every year, 75% are men. None of this is good. What do you think are the reasons for this? The researchers have lots of ideas. What do you think? Why is it that so many men report feeling this way? Why is it that so many of our young men who should be thriving, who should be doing well, are instead struggling? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. It's not the happiest of topics. I understand that. Important nonetheless. Important to talk about. Doesn't have to be a downer for 2 hours. Many young men are doing very well. Maybe the young man you know is one of them. Maybe if they're doing well and they're thriving, what are the factors that you think contributed to that success for that young man? But if you know someone, a young man who is struggling with these sorts of issues, but has managed to climb out of it and feel better, get on a healthier path, what happened? Tell us what that journey was like. Having so many young men, potentially millions of young Canadian men, struggling this way is not good. Millions of hopeless or even angry young men. That can only mean trouble. That can only mean trouble. We're just introducing the topic. We want to see where the conversation takes us today. We hope you'll take part. You can do that by calling 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, mention that, please. We'll make you a priority. 1-833-668-2577. The young man you know. How is he doing? I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We are talking about young men today. The young man that you know, say up to the age of 30 or so. How's that young man doing? Is that young man thriving, doing okay, struggling? 1-833-668-2577 to Ryan in Halifax. Thanks for calling, Ryan. You're on the air.
Rob, how are you this afternoon?
Very good, Ryan. Thank you.
Good,
How are
good.
you?
Love the show, Rob. I'm great,
Thank
thanks.
That's good.
Yeah, so just wanted to comment on the young man's mental health because I think it is such an important topic. And I just wanted to share a bit personally. You know, I'm 40 years old. Father of 2 and a husband, and I think as men we tend to have to become masters of bearing our emotions, and I think that's ingrained in us at a very young age that we're taught, you fall, stand up, take it like a man, be a man. Those things are taught to us very early on. So I think one of the challenges is, and I think that bleeds down through generations, is, understanding that men can have feelings. And I think one of the other big differences maybe between men and women is women tend to carry their emotions a little bit differently. You might notice that they're upset a little more, where a man a lot of times can be dealing with anger or stress or those type of things, but you may never know it. So I think the other side of it is we need to open up a little bit more as men, be willing to share our feelings when we're going through stressful situations, and stop trying to bury everything. So that's really my point today, is just telling the guys out there, chat with your friends, your spouses, anybody that you need to share when you're going through those tough times, because talking about it can make a significant difference.
Right, but you think part of the problem is this, one of the terms or phrases that was popping into my head today as I was getting ready for the show was like, suck it up. You're, as a man, you're kind of like
Yep.
taught, or there's this idea, you just have to suck it up, right?
And that's exactly it. It goes back to that point I made of, stand up, be a man, take it like a man. Like, those things are all said to us at very young ages. I think that still continues. I'm probably at fault for saying it to my own son. So I think we need to change that narrative. Essentially, at a younger age, we need to be teaching our young men that it's okay to have these feelings, and sometimes it is okay to cry in situations. And, I think that is the way to change this for future generations, is to make it more acceptable for men to be able to share emotions.
Very good. Ryan, you've got us off to a great start. Thank you for your call today from Halifax to Calgary. Cameron is up next. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Cameron. Yeah, good to hear from you today. The young man that say under the age of 30, how's he doing?
Okay, my perspective is a little bit different. The way I see the thing. First of all, I think, as the caller before me said, that yes, men are kind of tend in that way, that we have to suck everything, and we have to absorb it. Yeah, there should be kind of a pressure button, pressure release button. That is one thing. But also, if you look at it, the way the things are going, so much influx, so many students, so many immigrants are coming into the country. And I'm immigrant myself. I'm not against immigration, not at all. I say this thing, first of all. I came to this country almost 20 years ago. But the way the last government or the last prime minister have brought the people in, that is putting a lot of pressure onto the system and young people. You see so many university graduates who are finding a job. I see, right. At my workplace,
Lack of job opportunities, right? A lot of competition in the job market. Sure. Yeah.
That's what it is. And I don't blame those students, those international students who have come in, but they're taking over the jobs from the student who has started in this country from grade 1 or kindergarten, now done the university, and there's no job. Oops. Now what? This is a big pressure. I know few young people who are under so much depression because of these things. Look at it this way: if I do not have, or if you do not have, a proper source of income, you are not bringing food on the table, and you are the man of the house. So of course you will get under depression. And this, when you earlier when you talked about that 75% out of 4,000 are men, oh my God, that is such a shocking number. So to me, this is one of the things we have to fix our immigration system. Again, I say this again and again, I am an immigrant. I'm not against immigration, but if somebody has come here as a student, has to stay as a student. If somebody has come here in some other position, has to stay in some other position.
Right.
Do not mix up the things. Do not take away the jobs of of the young people, of the kids who have been born and raised here. That puts a lots of pressure on them.
Okay, thank you for your opinion, and I hope to get more of your opinions today on the young man that you know. How is that young man doing? That's our topic for today. Young man, around the age of 30, 20 to 30, roughly speaking. Thriving, doing okay, or struggling? A lot of young men are struggling these days. 1-833-668-2577. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The young man that you know, how is that young man doing? Join the discussion today. It's an important one. Paul in Red Deer. Hello, Paul. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi, Paul.
Here's my take, Rob.
Okay.
By the way, thank you for your program. I've always enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So a couple ways. One is that last man he hit it like right on the button for the most part. But from the psychological point of view, so I was a young man. I'm a very much older man now, but I was a young man at the time, and I wanted to go back to school, and I had dyslexia really bad, and I had problems with reading and stuff, and I was working a lot, but I wanted to go back to school and better myself, and I had to see this psychologist first. I don't even know if you'd call him a psychologist. It was a government fella that said, you got to come in and we do this testing on you. And so at the end of all the testing, the man told me that, you'll never be able to work in a warehouse. You'll never be able to do all these different kinds of jobs. He went through all these jobs that I could never, ever be able to do. I wanted to be a plumber at the time, and he told me all these things I couldn't do. And when I left there, I was bawling, but I had told him when I was in the room, I said, you know what? I've worked at warehouses where if I couldn't read it, they had a number, and I'd use the number. I had a system, basically. Life teaches you systems. You go through life and you learn different ways.
Right. You adapted, yeah.
You have to deal with situations. But I've had friends of mine that were psychologists, I call them psychos, but and I asked him one time, I said, why is it that this young lady in particular, she's always in the hospital that you're trying to help? And he had nothing, he couldn't answer me. And what I have seen myself, Rob, is a lot of young people, they become confused because the information that they're given is not, I'm just going to say it that way, the information they're given is not accurate about themselves. Somebody has made an assessment about them. They've asked them questions. We're all different. We're all different. And a question to you and a question to me, if somebody asked me this question, asked you, we would give maybe a similar answer, but it may be a totally different answer. So they have their little chart that they go by, and it's like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. And if you're on this chart, you're not doing it this way, then you're not normal. And so, yes, a lot of people are having hard times today, personally, because I don't think that there's a lot of psychologists that are coming out that are not really. People need to talk. That's what it boils down to. Is people need somebody to sit down next to them and just.
But you think there might be, say, gaps in the mental health care system, though, right? Lack of maybe quality care or something like that, or.
I fully comply with that.
Okay.
And I think that's where part of our greater problem is that a lot of our young people are, they're depressed, but now they're being told, oh, well, you're in this category or that category, and then they start thinking that way. I mean, hey, they're I was impressionable, but I mean, instead of laying down the sword, I knew I was living under stairs for a while because I had no place to go, but it was like I had to shake myself and say, you know what, I need a job. I got to get a job. And my parents taught me early, you clean your room, you do this, you do that, you come out and help with the oil change, come out and, help me change this bearing. A lot of families don't have that today. They don't have two parents, but, and that's very unfortunate. And I wish
family
that
breakdown.
Today,
okay. Yeah. right?
I wish
Okay.
school city. I'm sorry. Anyways,
I'm
Rob,
glad
you
you're
have
doing
fantastic
better.
work.
I'm glad you're doing better. We've got to run, though. The news is coming up. Thank you for your call and joining the discussion. We'll be right back. The well-being of Canadian young men today on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Right back to our phone calls on the topic of the day. The young man you know. How is that young man doing? Craig is in Halifax. Hi, Craig.
Hey, Rob. How are you?
Very good, Craig. Thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Glad you brought up this topic. It's something that I've looked at before. I have a ex-wife, I guess I'll call her, that struggles with mental health. So I did some research on it, and I stumbled across the same thing that you did, that 75% of suicides are men. A piece that I think we're missing is it tends to be, from what I could see in the research, is that it's Caucasian men that normally are the majority of men that are killing themselves.
Okay.
And I believe the reasoning. I do believe the reasoning for that is, even our society today, even our school systems, there always has to be a villain of something, and young men now feel like they're the villains of history, the villains of the past, and the only ones that can really be feel like they can have a shot taken at them without any repercussion. Again, I guess in my opinion, but from what I see. So young men that are out there today in the school system, they don't feel, valued. And then as you grow up, I find there's a lot of supports for, women's health. There's here, Brawny House, if you're a woman and you run into problems. There's a lot of things for people if they're new to the country. They can find some resources to help them out. And if you look around on the street at the homeless, it tends to be a high portion of Caucasian men, I find, because they don't have those systems to fall back on. They don't have a Brawny House. They don't have a lot of mental health. And everything you hear is mental health pushed for, women. I feel like they just generalize health to be men's health, I guess. There doesn't seem to be any targeted men's health, in my opinion.
Okay.
And with your first caller, I do believe he's right with the emotion, you being able to talk and speak and even cry as a man. Again, sort of with what I've seen and what I've experienced, is that's a very easy thing to say, but I find a lot of us are ingrained, even women, they may want a man who shares his emotions, but when that emotion does come out, I find it's hard for them to view, there may be a view of that man now internally, maybe seeing him cry. He's not as strong as they thought he was, not as reliable. That's really how I feel about the situation.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Yep, appreciate your input today. 1-833-668-2577. The young man you know, how is he doing? Say between the ages roughly of 20 and 30 years old. Ryan in Kitchener up next. Ryan in Kitchener. Hello,
Hey,
Ryan.
pal. How you doing today?
Very good, Ryan. Thank you.
Good. Last caller. Again, I couldn't agree more with the last caller. In my experience, and sharing feelings and emotions to a female might tend to weaponize them or look at you in a different light. And one thing I can say, looking at absolutely. Looking at age 20 to 30-year-old men nowadays, I've employed a few of them, and I find that the smallest adversity will send them to a point of shambles where they cannot operate in the day. And I liken that back to parenting, right? So one thing I can say, if you're depressed or you have mental health concerns, I've always helped people in a sense, just make a list from 1 to 10, and it can be putting a sock on your left foot, 1, sock on the right foot, 2. But when you get to the bottom of that list, you take it off, you have a sense of accomplishment. And a sense of accomplishment does tend to progress you in the right direction. Now, my question is, what does crying accomplish?
What does crying accomplish? Okay.
I get
What do
it.
you
You
think
want to,
crying? Are you
express.
suggesting
Well,
it doesn't accomplish anything? Is that what you're suggesting? Or
no, but I just don't think it accomplishes
okay,
the right things to move the person in the right direction. There's nothing wrong with crying.
okay,
Hell, every time I see the Stanley Cup, I cry. I don't know why, but I do. Every time I see Sydney
right,
score the golden goal, I cry. It's an emotion, right?
okay,
However,
right,
it
right.
doesn't progress me in the right direction. Crying is okay. It's okay to acknowledge and see what your feelings are. But then why you're feeling those feelings will help you obtain a solution to keep you away from those mental health concerns, in my opinion. And that's how I'm raising my
Okay.
voice. Cry if you
But
want,
you say
fellas,
you
but
you
remember,
have you have. If I could just interrupt, I want to just kind of want to
Mhm,
circle back to something that you said earlier, that you've
for sure.
employed some young men, say between 20 and 30 years old, and you find them to be whatever my term would be emotionally fragile. Would that be fair? They're emotionally
Yeah, I think that's
fragile.
pretty accurate.
Okay, so why
Yeah,
do you
for the
think
most
that
part.
is?
You know what? I think not being held accountable for their actions in the past, never being told no. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Okay,
Rob, you and I are
okay,
roughly around the same age. Like, you're out of the house until the streetlights come on. That's just one thing. Now, it's not so common. Not the solution to everything, right? But listen, if
okay,
you can't go do the things you want to do unless the lawn's mowed, the garbage is taken out, and your room's clean. If you don't hold them to account to do those things, they will find in life when an employer takes them on and says, no, you don't get paid
okay.
unless you do these actions, they're not used to having that mentality. So I think the cause is soft parenting is why our kids
Soft
nowadays are
parenting.
facing so
Okay,
much. Yeah, I do, honestly.
okay. They've been coddled. They've been coddled,
Yes,
if
sir.
you
Yes, sir.
okay. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. It's out there for other people to comment on. 1-833-668-2577. We'll stop here. Be right back with more of your calls. There's a couple of free lines available there. We'd love to hear from you. The young man that you know, how's he doing? That's the talkback topic. 1-833-668-2577 on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
How is the young man doing? The young man you know, say 20 to 30 years old. How is that young man doing? That's our topic today. Joanne up next. Hi, Joanne.
Hello, how
Hi,
are
Joanne.
you?
Very good, Joanne. Good to
Hello?
hear from you. Yeah, very good. Very nice to hear from you.
It's interesting to hear all of the men's perspective, and I think it's a multifactorial thing that is causing all of this. There's been a lot of change over the times. So I do appreciate recognizing a need to express their emotions. There's a couple men in my life, young men, that are doing extremely well, and I have to say they come from non-broken homes with strong father figures. And
Okay.
as some of these other gentlemen, they've had discipline, keeping them, guided on social media, involved in sports activities, things that make them have physical socialization. I think we've seen algorithms on a lot of this social media that has been causing depression in both males and females. And then you think of
Yes.
isolation. And you had a great show the other day about not everybody's going to be a doctor, and we have people who would be great at trades. And I was talking to my kids who are 28, and it was bad mouth back then, like it had a stigma, and I think it still does. But people could find rewarding, fulfilling positions that might help. So I think there's a lot of negativity coming at these young men, including video games, and it's just so many different things. But it's interesting, those that have succeeded have very strong family support and guidance,
Okay.
and some
But
have
you've
gone into
also
trade.
suggested, and I'm glad you called today, because one of the most troubling statistics that I came across in getting ready for the show today was this one. 7 out of 10 young Canadian men say they're isolated, socially isolated. Socially
Makes sense
isolated.
to me.
And you said that the young men who are really doing well, and you said several of them are engaged in a lot of like in-person socialization, sports and stuff like that, right?
I think as human beings, we need the socialization, and for
Right.
boys and girls, regardless. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm probably your age. When I grew up, the three of my best friends, we would sit around, or the guys we knew, and hang out and do whatever. Now they seem to do it even online. So maybe they're getting something from that, but they're not getting the physical contact and you know, and but even still, multifactorial things. They allowed their phones in school. There was a study that was done when they took the phones away from the kids. Within the first 3 months, the kids had actually realized that they are socializing with their schoolmates, boys and girls. So
Isn't that
they're not all
interesting?
sitting at
Okay.
their phones at the lunch table. So I would go with what you read in the study, the isolation, and then throw COVID in there. And
Yes,
it's
yes,
just,
yes, yeah. Yeah,
so
very
I
good.
think
Thank you.
isolation is not good for
Yep.
humans. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for your call today. Good to have a woman call the show today. Charles in Halifax. Hi, Charles. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, good to hear from you, Charles. Thank you for calling.
Yeah,
What's your
likewise.
experience?
Great topic. I just kick off by saying I do think both young men and young women have significant challenges with all that is thrown at them, and some of which other callers have mentioned: social media, societal pressures, the pursuit of perfection. So I think it's both. I'll zoom in on the question at hand. What I seem to see of young men under 30 is, and I believe this has been proven by some academics, I understand boys and girls learn differently within the school system. They have different styles of learning. And I think it's been pointed out by others, and I'm not in this field, that to a degree, the method of sitting at a desk quietly and doing one's lessons, grades 1 through 12, doesn't often suit boys as well as it suits girls. Now, again, I'm not an authority on it, but from what I've seen from young men under 30, it seems as though, and again, a previous caller mentioned this, is that it seems like there's a bit of a target on their foreheads,
backs.
really, not just.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
All right.
yeah, backs, forehead. I mean, it almost seems as though it's an accepted target in that you are this, and yes, to a degree, you have been potentially the causation of many of the world's problems. Da, 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 da. So it seems as though they are struggling, I think, to find a sense of identity and purpose.
Right.
And
But
I
even
seem to
their
see
own
men.
identity may have been devalued. Fair to say? Devalued?
That I'm not as sure of. Other
Okay.
than I would say this. I would say this though. If I was to point in a direction, I would suggest the cards to a degree are stacked against them early on in the educational system. When I think of young children, you see them. The boys seem by nature to be more active. Grades 1 through, they just seem to be more active. They seem to get in trouble more. And that even, I think it even carries over to the workplace, where I think men within an office environment sometimes have greater challenges than females. I'm not entirely sure why, but it just seems though we do learn differently, we operate differently, and it does seem to be, in some cases, it seems to be quite acceptable, I would suggest, to treat men perhaps a little harsher than their female counterparts across the board.
Okay. All right. It's out there. Thank you, Charles. Be right back. Young men, how are the young men doing in this country, in your opinion? 1-833-668-2577. It's Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
We're talking about young men today. Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. I'm Rob Snow, the young man that you know, 20 to 30 years old, roughly. How's that young man doing? Thriving, doing okay, struggling? We've talked about some of the statistics that have been in the news. Let's review some of those again. 67% of young men 18 to 29 report feeling emotionally overwhelmed at least once a week on a weekly basis. 6 out of 10 say they feel tense and alone in their daily lives, tense and alone. 6 out of 10 suffering from moderate to high anxiety. 43% Suffering from depression, 18% in the general population. 7 out of 10 say they are socially isolated. 40% say they have no one they can confide in. Isn't that a sad state of affairs? And very few seek help. Fewer than 1 in 5 young men seek help. Researchers say that's because of stigma. It's not a masculine thing to do to ask for help if men are struggling. Let's get back to it here. John in Airdrie, thanks for waiting. John, you're up next on Talkback. Estenar in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Estenar.
Yeah, hi.
Hi there.
Actually, my name is Steiner.
Steiner. Okay. I don't
Steiner,
know.
yeah. And
Yes, you've called before. Steiner, yes.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I have to say that I grew up in Norway, and after the war, it was not an easy time. And for me to get an education, I had to go to Sweden to take my engineering. And right after, I was put into the Air Force because all the Scandinavian countries, the young men, and even today, even some young women will serve in the armed forces. And the point I wanted to make, what I personally observed, because I also was trained as an officer, so I had a lot of people. In fact, I was serving in boot camps for a while. And they came in as boys because they came in at the year they were 20. But the experience they got in the armed forces was tremendous. And I can tell you that all the young men that graduated when I was there, the base I was at, there was about 5,000 men. I can tell you they graduated as men. They knew what they were going to do. They knew exactly, because we learned from each other. And if we could go back to school, we could go apprentice, we could do whatever. Look at the Scandinavian countries and their economy today. These countries, it is unbelievable. Canada has a lot to learn, and the reason I came to Canada was because of the war veterans from the Second World War. The Canadian veterans had high regards both in Norway and Holland, for example, because you helped us to get the freedom back in those countries. And I had to share this with you because I really feel that it wouldn't hurt Canada to have young men served in the forces, maybe even for 6 months. So
like a mandatory,
my
we've talked about this, like a mandatory service to the country.
Yes.
Something like they have that in
Yes.
many other countries, as you
Yes.
mentioned. Yeah, you think that would be beneficial to young men? Give them some
It
structure,
would
give
be
them some skills.
They never, and I can tell you, when you were training, for example, to go in combat, you had to trust each other. That was the most important thing. And we were told by people that had been in the Second World War, and if you don't have the trust among yourself, your life expectancy is very short. And these were people that had been in the war. So, but the Canadian history, when we go back, and we need to learn from that, it's on the world scale, it is absolutely beautiful. And this is why we should talk to each other and learn from different countries how they are doing. Finland, for example, they are tremendous. A small country, or not a small country, but the population is not that great. They could put, if there was a situation where they had to take everybody in for war duty, I think it is over 900,000 soldiers they can put in place.
Right. Okay. All right, Steiner.
It's
Thank you.
amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You firmly believe in it very clearly, but we have to move along. Let's go to Steve up next in Calgary. Thanks for waiting, Steve.
Hey, how are you, Rob?
Very good, Steve. Thank you for calling.
So, Rob, first of all, I appreciate your show and I listen to you every day while I'm working.
Thank you.
I'm 57, and when I was 14, so early 80s, I was going through huge depression. There was so much pressure on me to try to pick what career I could go into to pay for a house and everything else like that. And I was lucky enough to fall upon a good career, and I was able to buy my first place at 18 years old. And so I had some sort of gratification that I've succeeded as a man at some level. My son at 21 now, he's says he has no hope, and he suffers from severe depression, that so much so that I worry about him every day, because he feels like he'll never get a home and be able to survive, So I think it's the time that seems to be getting worse on young men, of this huge pressure to be the holder of the money, or, I mean, it's
Right.
different because both parties do it, but
to
I think
be
there's
to be
still that-
seen as successful, to
Yeah.
achieve certain life goals, whether that's, as you say, buying a home, or whether it's getting married or starting a family. These are still important life goals to people, right?
Yeah, and I think, men kind of carry a little bit heavier with that, at least through the last years, but even now, it's still pressure on them that they've got to be the breadwinner. They have to do it to say, yeah, I'm a man now, kind of feeling, So it's a little bit difficult these days, and I'm struggling just trying to keep my head above water, let alone worry about whether my son's going to be able to do it.
Gosh, that's really heavy duty. Yeah, and I'm
I
sure
think
you're
a lot
not
of
alone.
people are going through that. Yeah,
Well, I think so.
agree with
I think it bears out in the research. Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
it's such a
and,
great point that you make. I hope we can explore that as we make our way through this hour of the program. And you've got us off to a good start, sir. Thank you for calling. 1-833-668-2577. It's been busy, but there are some lines there available if you'd like to join our conversation today and tell us about the young man that you know and how he's doing. If he's struggling, why is he struggling? This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The young man you know under the age of 30, how's he doing? Alex in Waterloo, first-time caller. Thanks for calling, Alex.
Oh, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for
Very
taking my
good,
call.
Alex. Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, so I've got a son that's 24.
Okay.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s, but I remember this very well. It's sometime around 1990 in Ontario, so I'm assuming it went all over the country, that they talked about in the school system that it was more structured toward boys to learn than girls to learn, and they were going to change that to make it more towards the girls learning, because we learn differently. We just do.
Okay.
And I remember at the time I said, that's a really bad idea. Maybe go back to where, it used to be there was a boys' school and a girls' school, right? And they didn't combine until college or university. So that was one thing. The other thing, when my son went through grade school, the majority of boys in his classes were on drugs. Pharmaceutical drugs. They were diagnosed with ADHD, all these things, and they were putting them on them. They tried to put my son on that nonsense, and it was a battle royale. But
it might be nonsense for some. It might not be nonsense for all. I mean,
I know, but if you put the majority of young boys, you change how you educate. You don't let the boys get their energy out. Then you start putting them on drugs. I mean, that's not a good thing. And then they started talking about toxic masculinity, and boys need to be more emotional. And it's got to be confusing because, for the most part, boys are just boys, right? And we're not girls. We're not as emotional as girls are. We're just not. But if you keep telling young boys that they should be, we're confusing the hell out of them.
Okay,
And
they're
it's just
confused.
a bad thing all around. I see it with my son's friends. And yeah, it's a hard time for all of them. And we have done such a disservice to our boys. And I don't know how
Well,
you
you
fix
think the reason why these researchers are uncovering these findings is because of the way boys have been educated in the education system, decisions that have been made in the education system primarily.
Well, I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, I don't know the answer, but I think that's part of it. But for example, what I'd like to see in that study is how many of these boys in their study, how many of them were put on drugs?
Okay, well,
Like,
I
they
don't
don't
have any
study that.
information on that. But okay,
Well, no, but
all right. Thank you,
you're not
Alex.
a.
Yeah, no, no, it's interesting. Some of the points you raised, some of the previous callers have mentioned. Darlene is in Red Deer today. Hello, Darlene.
Hello, Rob. How are you today?
Very good, Darlene. I mean it. What do you think is happening? What's your experience here?
Well, I have 3 boys, raised them as a single mom for most of that. Unfortunately, I did lose one to suicide
Oh no.
when he was just shy of 19. So I relate to this topic
Okay.
as a mother. My oldest son now is 30. My youngest is 23. They're doing well. They're coping, but they went through a lot of trauma as well. I kind of blame a really toxic divorce on
Okay.
why my son took his life. But I can relate to all the callers calling me in, and I wish there was more conversation around mental health. I know I've called into your show a couple of times, and every topic I relate it to why aren't we talking about mental health and the effects a lot of political decisions are made and what it does to our mental health, because it's a crisis. My son was very socially engaged, very popular. He was a hockey kid. We lived in Drumheller and Red Deer. In both places, he was, well loved and very socially engaged. And we didn't actually see it coming. He was the one that everybody turned to for advice. He was up all night on his phone helping other people out. He was a very kind soul. But we don't talk about it enough. And I wanted to call in because, I agree with the last caller about over-medicating and trying to stifle our children and make them be of a certain way when there's so many different learning styles out there. I think social media has a big play in a lot of it, but I was fortunate enough to be invited to a roundtable discussion when the UCP government was, vying for leadership, Jason Kenney Day sort of thing.
Okay.
Leela here was running in Calgary, and I was invited to a roundtable conversation. We all got to bring up topics of concern, and when it came to my turn, I brought up mental health and what are we doing about it? What are we doing for our young people, especially men? And she herself talked about her own story with her husband and addiction issues and mental health issues, but she had no answers. And I'm like, well, you're running for leader of the UCP government, but you have nothing to say about mental health, even though your own personal experience has you have a lot of experience. But what I'm saying, I guess, is there isn't enough solutions, there isn't enough conversations, and I'm always going, why aren't we talking more about mental health?
Okay.
I don't know what the answers are, even though I have a lot of experience, but I think over medicating is a good point. I had a son who had ADHD, was diagnosed. And at one point, I was in a school system, and they opened up a cupboard and showed me all the kids that were medicated and all the medications that these kids are on, trying to fit them into a box. I think that's part of it. And my partner's almost 60 years old, and he says he won't talk about his emotions at all. He's just been raised that way. So I think there's a lot of stifling going on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your call. Yeah, really appreciate it. Be right back on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The young man that you know, how is he doing? Brendan up next. Hi, Brendan. Hi, Brendan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Can you hear me,
Brendan.
Rob?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Hi.
Brendan. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'm calling as a 30-year-old male here, and I usually just listen, but I haven't called in. I've been a long-time listener, but I figured I'd give my perspective here just because I kind of am right in that age.
Okay.
Yeah. So jumping back to the last call, I kind of wanted to add to that. I think mental health for people my age and, from like that 20 to 30 range is something that needs to be discussed big time. I have friends who, refuse to talk with anyone about the mental health issues they may be going through, even though they might be evident. And I just think that there does need to be more of a push for people our age. There's still a stigma around it, and I think we're still getting it's evolving and it's getting better, but from like our parents' generation down to us, it's just there's been a huge stigma around it, and I see it all the time, where people could definitely benefit from talking to someone or just having an outlet. And therapy therapy, for example, it comes in many forms, whether it be going to the gym or seeing an actual therapist or having a community just that you can, I guess, talk to and discuss what you're going through with. It's super important. And I think a big issue that we're seeing today is because the isolation comes from everyone and the just the fact of how big social media is in our lives right now. Like, we get off work, we get home from school, and the first thing that you do is you jump on your phone and you just get stuck there, and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you're just met with bad news over and over again, right? So I just think it's tricky. We're in a hole, and we're being bombarded with constant bad news, and
yes,
I don't know. It's just really hard to deal with.
Okay. Thank you for your call and your contribution to our show today. Good to hear from you. Be back right after the latest breaking news. We'll be back on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We're talking about young men today and asking the young man that you know, say 20 to 30 years old, how's he doing? How's he doing? Doing okay? Thriving, maybe, or struggling? 1-833-668-2577, because a lot of Canadian young men are struggling, according to the research. Wade, Sylvan Lake. Wade. Hello, Wade.
Hey, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good, Wade. How are you?
I'm borderline magnificent.
Okay.
Anyway,
couldn't be better. That's good to know.
I would like to say I have told so many people to tune into your show, and people are, and they're listening out here in Alberta. So it's good.
It's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You betcha. I just want to talk a little bit about boys and girls. There's definitely a different, I don't know, DNA or whatever you want to call it. And I can tell you, our grandson is 5 years old. Our granddaughter is 2. When our grandson was 2, you could not get him to sit down and color in a coloring book or play with Play-Doh or all of those kinds of things that, you need to sit and work on. He wanted to run and play and fight and jump and you name it. It was all rough and tumble. Our granddaughter, who's 2, she immediately loves to sit down and color and go through her pencils and look at the colors, and she just sits there, and there can be chaos going on around her, and she's just sitting there coloring and playing away while her brother's running around with his cousins fighting and jumping and yelling. So it's a difference between boys and girls, men and women. And so I think it's just in our DNA that way, and we shouldn't be trying to make everybody, talk the same, walk the same, look the same, act the same, because
Sure.
not true.
Now, if I could, Wade, just because you've called me several times before, and you don't like smartphones, and you really don't like social media. You've expressed that in the past. I'm just wondering when we hear these statistics, and a number of the callers have brought it up today, the role, say, social media and the smartphone is playing in the struggles that some of our young men are having. What role do you think it's playing?
Well, I think it's huge.
You think
I
it's
really
huge?
don't
Yeah.
have anything
Okay.
against smartphones. I know they've changed the world in a good way, and it's amazing. What I have a problem with is children having access to social media on an electronic device 24/7, 365, when their minds are just beginning to be shaped. And you
Right.
can see it yourself. Go to a mall, look around, and look what all the kids
Oh,
are
yeah,
doing. Look
yeah,
what their
yeah.
parents are doing. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I know you laughed at me when I said make smartphones illegal for children, but I kind of changed my mind on that. I just want to eliminate social media on portable
Okay.
electronic devices for children. That's
Right.
where I
Okay.
go on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I'd
Fair
also
enough.
like to talk a little bit about depression.
Okay.
I had my own personal situation with that. It happened to me a couple of times in the past where I don't know what happened. My bills were paid for, my kids were doing great, my house was paid for, everything was great, and I couldn't get motivated enough to get up and cut the grass, even though I needed it. I knew it needed to be done, and that's not me. But I'll be darned if I could shake that, and I didn't want to talk to anybody about anything or do anything. That happened to me twice in my life, and it just kind of went away on its own. But the
Okay.
last time it happened, I lost my sense of humor for about 3.5 years. And I'll tell you, it was brutal till I finally said to myself, okay, now I've got to go see a Sawbones because I can't handle this anymore. So I went and saw a doctor.
Yeah.
He gave me some medication to try out. And he told me in 4 to 6, this won't do any good for 4 to 6 weeks. So give it some time. In 3 days, Rob, my anxiety level dropped to the basement. And I went back to see him, and I hugged him, and I told him, these pills have changed my life, and I take one a day, and I don't care if it takes my liver out, gives me a heart attack, I get cancer. I don't
Okay.
care. If I can maintain my sense of humor for the rest of my life, I'm in.
Yeah. Well, you do have a good one. Thank you. Yeah. Good to hear from you. Wade, I'm glad you're doing well. It's good to hear your voice again. Who do we have up next here? How about Thomas? Hi, Thomas. You're up next on Talkback.
Hi, can you hear me there?
Yeah, hear you just fine, Thomas. Thanks for calling. What's your experience?
You know, I'm the age of 25, so I'm on the younger side of it. I've never
Okay.
called in any like radio talk show or anything like that. I
Yeah.
just like to say kind of what I'm going through, and it's just like nowadays people on social media, like the saying of comparison is the thief of joy is really evident. Is you compare yourself all the time to social media, and like people are making so much money on social media and all of these nice cars and houses, girlfriends, all stuff like that, and then more normal people, like I'm a blue collar guy, and it's like I can't get that. So, you know, you get down on yourself, and there's too many options, and what do I want to do here? What do I want to do there? And even down like in high school, like they give you so many options of what you want to do, you have no idea. You get swamped, and then all of a sudden, like 5 years gone by, and you're like, what am I going to do with my life, you know? And it kind of robs your sort of sense of purpose. And I feel like with men specifically, like in myself, is if I have a sense of purpose, something to do, either make money for my family or try and go buy a house, something like that, if I have a sense of purpose, I'm fine. You know, I find that me and my friends, stuff like that, that's what we need as men, or specifically me, like as a young man. But nowadays, the government, it's so hard to make money, or money doesn't really go that far, that your sense of purpose starts just dwindling, and it just kind of falls away.
Yeah,
I
like
feel that's
yeah,
what
certainly
a lot of
because of
men.
the last few years and the cost of living and inflation, a lot of people are feeling that they're working as hard as they ever had before, but they're not really getting any further ahead, right? And that could be very
It's just
discouraging.
going nowhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super discouraging. That's what ruins people's like sense of purpose. It's just I can't feel like you can't do
So,
nowhere and you
Thomas,
get stuck, and that's yeah.
Look, we're a little tight on time, Thomas, but I do want to ask you this as a you said 25? Is that what you said you are?
Yeah,
25?
I'm 25.
So when you talk to your other male friends of around the same age, I mean, do you guys talk about mental health or emotions or feelings or any of that stuff, or is it you just do guy stuff?
Yes and no. Like sometimes if like I remember when I was in college, I was really down in the dumps and I really needed help. And then like I just went to my best friend, and it takes a lot of courage to say it, be like, I'm not doing good. Like, what do I do? And they'll like, he got me to see a therapist and that fixed me up real good. But I find nowadays, like I've known some friends where they're down in the dumps. I'm like, dude, go see a therapist to help me. And they're like, I don't want to burden them with my problems. And there's a lot of that going on where guys don't want to burden other people with their problems because, at the end of the day, it's kind of not great, but a lot of people just don't care. So kind of to be spread out and go see help.
Well, look, Thomas, thank you. Thank you for being so open about that. I appreciate it. Be right back on Talkback.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So we've been having a discussion today about young men in Canada and their struggles. We've simply been asking the young man that you know, how's he doing? Say a man between 20 and 30 years old. How's he doing? Stacy up next. Hi, Stacy. You're on Talkback.
Hi, Rob.
Hi there.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you fine.
Awesome. So thanks for taking my call, and it is my first time calling you. I've listened lots of times, and it's very informative, but this one hit me right in the feels. I have a son, too, and he's 23, and and I've listened to some callers, and the last caller was very helpful. It's nice to hear a perspective from another gentleman of that age. But I found that the only thing that's working for us is inserting myself into his life to kind of help him get his purpose, or because I feel like for my son, I don't know if it's social media, but he needs instant gratification, or all these things have to happen instantly, or if he's not making enough money, it's almost like he doesn't give himself time for the future. I mean, even for us, when we were younger, it didn't happen overnight. We had to work hard, and so I feel like that's a lot of the problem as well for these young guys. And Rob,
where do you think that comes from?
I'm sure it's like, is it social media? Is it these things are in their faces and they see them, and how easy it seems for somebody else to have reached that level, but.
Right.
Whereas, the rest of us, the most of us, we've had to work hard and we've had to wait it out, and time isn't, it goes by fast, but it doesn't go by that fast either, right?
Right.
So, but Rob, really, listening, like I'm lucky because I have my son still, and I know that we had a caller that lost her son to suicide, and that's my fear as well. Like I really struggle with my young man. So where does a person go? How do I get the help that he needs? What can I do as a parent, to help these guys?
Right. Yeah, I don't have the answer. Some of the callers have said, are men being left out of the mental health conversation? Why aren't there more, say, services that are targeting men, for example? I don't know if that's really a shortcoming. I don't have that kind of expertise, so. But that's why I'm asking these questions.
Yep. And if anybody knows and can call and honestly just tell us, where do we go or what do we do, right?
Right.
How do we help these young guys? Because it's my son, and I know it's his friends, and they're all struggling. It's true. They're all in this age struggling, to see something good to come out of their future. They can't see, that far ahead and see, oh, this could all happen. It's just not happening this minute.
Right.
So,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
that's such an interesting point that you make. Thank you for your call, Stacy. And you're not the first one to, speculate about social media. The researchers who have been looking at this issue, for example, maybe a place you might want to start is the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Lots of great information there that I found. They don't say social media is necessarily the root cause of the problem, but they certainly call it an accelerant. That's the term that they use. And we see this all the time. Those of us who spend any time on social media, I spend far too much time on social media. Come across this all the time. You're bombarded with it. The algorithm steers you that way. All of these beautiful, rich people, living these incredibly successful lives, and they have perfect hair and perfect teeth and beautiful bodies and live in fabulous homes and drive fancy cars. And it all seems to come so easy to them. Imagine you're a young guy and you're struggling in a job that's not fulfilling, and you're looking at your bank account and maybe you have enough to pay your rent. You see some other 20-something and they're driving a Lamborghini talking about the millions of dollars they've scored in the crypto market. How does that feel? Probably not very good. Maybe even feel like a failure. Maybe there are feelings of shame. What worries the researchers is that this can lead some young men down rabbit holes, and they'll find inclusion sometimes in the darker corners of the internet, and they're vulnerable to being influenced by extremist content in all its varieties. And there are the chances that some of these young men could become radicalized and become even more antisocial. Lonely and depressed young men and the internet, not a healthy combination. Be right back on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, let's get back to our phone calls in our final few minutes here on Talkback today about the well-being of young men in this country. Zach is in Calgary. Hi, Zach.
Hi, how are you, Rob?
Yeah, very good, Zach. Thanks for calling today.
Yeah,
What's your
first-time
experience?
caller.
Appreciate that.
So I'll just speak anecdotally as a 30-year-old in Calgary, but I've noticed it a lot actually with people my age. The three things that kind of brought me back into purpose was faith, family life, like marriage, and children.
Okay.
Kind of in that order, actually.
Really?
I didn't hear a lot of people that were calling speak about that, but that was something that I've noticed in my life that really kind of centered me, and actually a lot of people my age too. It's funny. You kind of go to the more traditional churches in Calgary. You go to, it's young people in their 20s, already got 2 or 3 kids. It's quite remarkable, actually. I don't know if you've noticed that at all, or.
Are you talking about like Catholic, Anglican, United Presbyterian churches? You're seeing young people in the congregations?
I'll say that specifically as a Roman Catholic. Like we have
Okay.
a traditional Latin Mass in Calgary,
Yeah.
and the median age there is you wouldn't believe it. Whereas you go to
Really?
kind of the more modern churches, and
Yeah.
no disrespect to that generation because I love them, but the median age there is like 70, 80.
Really, because my experience is, and I'm not much of a churchgoer anymore, but I was raised in the church, and uh, for many years I attended an evangelical church. I saw lots of young people, young families at the evangelical church. At the
Oh,
Anglican United Presbyterian churches, I saw it was silver hair everywhere. It was elderly
Yeah,
Canadians,
no,
not a lot of
and
young people.
it's still kind of that way, but I've noticed, especially the last 10, especially after COVID, really, even during COVID, it was the traditional churches, the churches that, preach purpose, have an
Hmm.
emphasis on, men being leaders and harnessing those good aspects of men, not the negative per se, but like strong leadership, courage. They have just been exploding with young people. In my personal experience, that's what I've noticed.
Okay,
I can't speak
really?
for, Eastern Canada. And, Canada, I guess you probably know, has more of a kind of a cynical view on religious life, on even on family life to a degree. But that's just my personal experience. I see a lot of young families and happy people.
And what did that do to you? I mean, you said that was kind of the stepping stone, and then the other stuff came later, family and children. But say before you, I'll use the term, rediscovered your faith, as opposed to after. Like, what did it do to you that it provided you this purpose?
Well, just my generation, right? We kind of, when I was a kid, that was still very much a part of Canadian life, was like family and faith.
Yeah.
Towards, the kind of, I want to say that too, when the iPhone came out, 2007, 2008, you started kind of seeing a fracturing of young people, and everybody was kind of in their own enclave, and it, chaos kind of breeds disorder. So when you have a unifying force like faith or family, it kind of centers men. And it's, if you're a believer in the faith, you believe that that's your purpose, right?
Okay. Wow, really interesting. Thank you. I'm glad you called. I hope you'll call again. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Friday Free-for-All tomorrow. We can pick up where we left off or start a brand new discussion tomorrow. You take the lead tomorrow. The latest breaking news next on News Radio.